Well, what is up, all of you variants on the planet of Arrakis? This is a special episode of Geekverse Reactions where we are strictly going to focus on the brilliant, and I'm spoiling my thoughts on it already, the brilliant, directed by Denis Villeneuve? I don't know how to say his name. I'm butchering it. DJ, I think your mic's muted there, but we'll get that going. There you are. There you are.
I think that is the correct pronunciation. Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that.
Yeah.
But regardless, he directed Dune. It was great in my opinion. But before we get this going, warning, this is a spoiler discussion. Where we're just open to say anything and whatever we want to say about the film. You tell us what you thought of this film in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or let us know on Discord if you're on the podcast. Click the Discord link that's in the description. Come on over there, join us, and have some fun with us. By the way, DJ, you're back. You're with me.
Yeah, it's always good to be back. I mean, anytime we get to talk anything Geekverse, I say this every time we do Geekverse, it's just a good time for me personally because I like talking about geeky things. I like talking to Caleb Keller. So why not put those together and have a podcast to go over all the geeky things that I enjoy and I know that you also enjoy. So
Yeah.
I'm here for it, and I'm ready to talk about some sand and some spice.
Yeah, well, listen. Let's just first, as we're having this discussion, and again, spoiler discussion, DJ, what I wanted to share with our listeners was how we viewed it, and maybe that way that could give our audience a clue as to maybe how our viewings, or maybe how we feel the way that we feel. So I think I've advertised it already personally on YouTube. I viewed it on or in a movie theater. I went to my local AMC theater. I got it done. I was so stoked for this film that I really wanted to go on the premiere night, but I had some things pop up on that Thursday night that prevented me from going, but I ended up going Friday. I recorded my initial reaction video on YouTube, so check that out if you haven't. And yeah, I saw it in theater, loud and proud, and it was great. DJ, what about you?
Well, I chose to see The Last Duel over Dune in the theater this past weekend. And I said this on our previous episode of Geekverse Reactions. I was more looking forward to The Last Duel than Dune initially. Having seen Dune now, I still think The Last Duel is better.
Okay.
However, Dune is such an incredible movie that its scope and what it provided on a cinematic level, even though I did not see it in a theater, I saw it at home on HBO Max, I still think that it's one of those movies that, and as I've said on previous Geekverse episodes, is going to go down in cinematic history as one of the best movies that's ever been made for what it kind of does on a cinematic scope, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
No, absolutely. And I kind of agree with you. I can't say it enough. I keep thinking about this film more and more and more, and I keep loving it more and more and more the more that I think about it. And what we're going to do is we're eventually going to talk about, the good things and, some flaws that we're seeing people discuss online. And, we're going to share it all here. But, just non-spoiler thoughts. It sounds like we both thoroughly enjoyed it. It seems like it is, in my opinion, a cinematic experience that I would really try to persuade anybody that loves film to try to experience in some way. I'm not going to be like gatekeeping and say you got to see it in theater or you're not a true diehard, because obviously, I'm talking to somebody that didn't see it in theater. But it's fine. Just get your Dune content however is appropriate. Because here's a news piece. We are getting a sequel regardless. So the job has been accomplished as far as getting Warner Brothers and Legendary Pictures to see that we need a second one. So that job has been done. So just watch it however you can. But it sounds like if you're still listening, you probably have watched it because we are getting into some spoilers. So what I wanted to do here off the top was to discuss thoughts from others on Dune before we go more so into our thoughts. And the first thing that I want to discuss with Dune is its Rotten Tomatoes scores currently. That's something that I always like to discuss because generally that's where the audience goes to see how people are feeling about the film. And currently on Rotten Tomatoes. The critic score is an 84%. And more importantly, because this is what it's all about, the audience score is a 91%. DJ, when you hear these numbers, what do you think?
They're accurate. I mean, they're just accurate. You know, for me, I said this when we did Geekverse with our new stuff, just our last episode. However, for me, I just, when I look at these scores, I think this makes sense. I could see where critics would think, okay, 84%. And I can see where audience would say 91%, because when I think about me and my opinion of it, I'm right there kind of in between those numbers. I would give it like a solid 87, 88, somewhere right in that range. And
Okay.
so for me, I think that's a very acceptable score, both critically and audience
Hmm.
wise.
Interesting. Interesting. You
Yeah.
know what?
Yeah.
If we're giving scores right now,
Okay.
I'm gonna give
Might
it
as
an
well.
A. I'm gonna give it an A. Let's go 94% from me. 94.
Wow.
I love it that much. I
You're
love it
showing
that
some of
much.
your teacher grading expertise, I feel like,
That is
in this
absolutely
moment.
accurate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's one of those things. I know it's for the beholder to kind of give their own grading,
Hmm.
but I think maybe this is one of those movies I need to revisit more and more.
Hmm.
Because like just last night, my wife and I watched Black Widow on Disney Plus, and I hadn't seen it since I was in the theater. And I told her, I was like, this is one of those movies I think I like more and more as I watch it.
Yeah.
And I think Dune might become one of those movies where, like, right now I'm sitting at like an 87, 88. I
Hmm.
may be like at a 99 in like 2 years. Who
There you go.
knows?
There you go. Well, DJ, somebody else that's kind of important outside of critics and outside of audience members kind of discussed recently about Dune. Who is that individual and what did they have to say?
A little guy, you may have heard of him. His name is Christopher Nolan.
Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, the one and only. Yeah, Christopher Nolan. I mean, he's one of the greatest filmmakers of our time.
Yes,
I
he
mean,
is.
just in a lot of ways, maybe the best. But I don't want to oversell the guy. What am I? What am I trying to do here? But anyway, he sat down with the director of Dune, Denis Villeneuve, and come to find out, I wasn't aware of this, but apparently they are both members of a directors guild. And they have this directors guild, who I'm actually blanking on the name of this directors guild at the moment, but they have their own podcast called the Director's Cut. And I've never heard of the Director's Cut. And now that I know about it, I will be checking in on it on a regular basis, because I love to know about film stuff. Sidebar, another podcast you should check in on a regular basis is none other than Mando Talk.
Absolutely.
So, and slash Geekverse Reactions. However, all that to say, these two directors, these masters of filmmaking, sat down together. And here's kind of the official synopsis of this podcast episode from the Director's Cut. Director Denis Villeneuve discusses his new film Dune with fellow director Christopher Nolan in a Q&A at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, an adaptation of Frank Herbert's groundbreaking science fiction novel. The film follows the son of a noble family who is entrusted with the protection of the most valuable asset and vital element in the galaxy. If you've seen the movie or read the book, you now know that as something called spice. So,
Yep.
In this podcast, Christopher Nolan, he actually said these thoughts, and I want to share these off the top before we kind of discuss any further. He said it is one of the most seamless marriages of live action photography and computer generated effects that he has ever seen. Goes on to say it is a real gift. Now, big words from a master, like I said, a master of filmmaking,
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Nolan. And I'm not just saying that as a Batman fan. I'm saying that as a fan of The Prestige and Interstellar. I'm saying that as a person who has seen a handful of his films. He's an incredible filmmaker. And so the fact that he's giving these perspectives, I think, lends so much to the weight and gravitas, if you will, of Dune as a full-fledged film. Caleb, do you have anything you'd like to say on his thoughts just from that one sentence, that one little clip?
No, other than I absolutely love to hear it. And I have to respect his opinion because of the things that you just listed and the films that he's worked on, the things that he's done, how respected he is in the industry. He knows what he's talking about more than I know what I'm talking about, so I'm going to defer to Christopher Nolan,
Sure.
even though, I've already voiced before, I think this film is absolutely beautiful and incredible to see. So, Christopher Nolan, other than just saying, you're awesome, I agree with you, sir.
Man, I agree with him too. And I know that I just waxed eloquently about my opinion of Christopher Nolan, but I can't speak enough about how much I respect this guy as a filmmaker. And for him to say these things to Denis Villeneuve, it's just like he's right. He
Yeah.
just is right. And there's no denying what Christopher Nolan has said, and there's no denying the proof that is in the pudding, if you will, that is Dune.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to say anything better about that movie,
Hmm.
in my opinion. We're going to say more about the movie, obviously,
Obviously.
but because like we're just getting into it, I
Hmm.
don't I don't want to just jump ahead just yet because it is a masterpiece of filmmaking.
Yeah.
It is, and to say it isn't is just not intelligent. I'm sorry. Like maybe I'm being very opinionated on that, but
Sure, sure.
it is a master piece of film.
Yeah, I think if you're somebody that appreciates filmmaking, you'll love Dune. If you're somebody that just wants to see bang, smash, crash, and all those different things,
Pew pew.
I could pew pew. There you go. I could see
Yeah.
why maybe Dune isn't for you. Um, but yeah, we'll get to more. We'll get to that a little bit more later too. Whenever we get to maybe some of the good, some of the bad that we could potentially see people taking from Dune. But real quickly before we dive deeper into the story, into the film, box office numbers. That's always important. How well did this Dune film perform over the weekend? Well, obviously, keep in mind that it is available on HBO Max at the same time. And with that said, the domestic weekend pulled in a $41 million number. In my opinion, and I'm not somebody that studies box office numbers, but in my opinion, that number is very impressive with the fact that it's on HBO Max at the same time. I feel like if it hadn't been on HBO Max at the same time, I've I said it off air, I'll stick to it. I think this movie would have made more money than Venom made, or Venom Let There Be Carnage made in its opening weekend, because the word of mouth has been so
Yeah.
good. Everybody is, for the most part, most people are saying nothing but good and maybe even great things about this movie. So, and word of mouth is always one of the best things about, or one of the most beneficial things to help the box office numbers climb. But just real quickly, so 41 million domestically over the weekend here in the States, but internationally, which by the way, it's been out internationally since last month, as early as September
That's
15th in
wild.
France. It has made 182 million internationally. So currently, to this date, approximately Dune has made 223 million dollars in the box office, which
Yeah.
again, I think being on HBO Max hurt that number in a big way. If I'm being completely honest, in my own opinion, but still, I think this is nothing but positives. And I think I even saw a statistic. I don't know how accurate it is, but I think I read something, a tweet here, so give or take, it might be right, it might be wrong. It said something about like 1.9 million views on HBO Max, and that bested Zack Snyder's Justice League cut. So, in my opinion, that tells me this is absolutely successful. DJ, what do you think of these numbers, and what do you think of the HBO Max positives, negatives? What do you think?
No, I don't think that there's anything negative to look at all with these numbers. In fact, I was trying to go back and figure out how much Venom made in its opening weekend by looking at
Mm.
previous show notes, but
I want to say it was 90.
I feel like it was 92. 90 as well, I should say. I wasn't 100% sure if it was 90 or not, so I was going to try to verify that. But a 90 is the number I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And then hearing that it's got 1.9 million, you know, views at home
Mm-hmm.
by people, me being one of them, you also having
Yeah.
watched it your second time around. So, just let me do some quick calculating really quick. If you think
Okay.
I paid like $12 for my ticket because convenience fees and
Sure.
blah 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 that
Sure.
AMC makes you
Sure.
do. You'd multiply that by what, 1.9 million? Is that what
Mm-hmm.
it was?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's that's 20 almost 23 million more dollars.
Yep.
So when you add that to the 41 million,
Yeah.
you're at 63 million,
And
you know.
you gotta consider too, people, for example, me and my brother Jacob, for
Yeah,
Zack Snyder's Justice League, I had him come over to watch that with
right,
me.
right.
People all over that watched it on HBO Max were probably like, "Hey, come on over, let's watch Dune together." So you could probably
Yeah,
give yourself, you could probably add another 12 to that number, honestly, because for me,
yeah,
Maddie, my spouse, so that's another $12. Jacob, that's another $12.
sure.
So I think that, just like you just said there, I think that verifies my personal take of, I think it could have beat Let There Be Carnage if it had been
Yeah.
theatrical exclusive.
And that's a good call because I know my dad and brothers watched it together. And
Mm,
granted, my brothers would qualify for the child ticket at a movie.
sure.
You still got to factor those kinds of things in.
Yeah.
You want to say, okay, yeah, these are this is like something that HBO, or not HBO but Warner Brothers. I don't think they missed out on the opportunity for
Mm,
more because they're still getting that revenue,
mm,
but it's still one of those like, yeah, these numbers didn't, it wasn't like hurt by it because I can't scroll more than 7 or 8 tweets down
right.
before I see something about Dune,
Yeah.
and maybe that's just because I am the niche audience,
Sure.
there. But at the same time, I've had conversations about Dune since having watched it, and I only watched it less. I mean, not even. Well, I guess it's been 24 hours at this point, but not even
Mm,
a whole 2 days has gone by, and I've already had multiple conversations about the movie with multiple people.
yeah.
So, I mean, for me, it's one of those where there's people talking about it, and I remember a few weeks back I even said I think Dune has the potential to be like the next Avatar.
Yeah, you did say that.
And I'm not saying it's going to have this cultural like let's put a ride at Disney World type of situation,
Right.
but and there's no way at this point. Like I was way off when I said that a few weeks ago. But I will say that this is the perfect indicator as to what people are saying about it.
Mm-hmm.
And if this movie had existed without the help of the internet, I
Mm-hmm.
think it would go down in history as a cult classic.
Hmm.
So I think we are in a weird place where we're seeing a cult classic actually become a classic,
Hmm.
which doesn't happen a whole lot, if
Right.
ever. I mean, there's a lot of good cult classic movies out there. First one that comes to mind is The Princess Bride.
Mm.
People love that film, and it wasn't recognized at its time, and it is now. So I think that if we didn't have the internet, Dune would be kind of seeing that take place instead.
Yeah.
Which again, all that lends back to the number of people who are watching it right now, because,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, word of mouth.
Right.
That's initially I was like, Dune, what is this? Oh, it's a Star Wars knockoff. Actually, no, Star Wars is technically a knockoff of Dune,
Right.
lest we forget. And now I'm like, okay, let's kind of check out the elements of this. As a Star Wars fan, I was being kind of a little nitpicky, if I'm
Mm.
being honest. But at the same time, all that plays back into these numbers, and I think that tells us a lot about what Warner Brothers was initially expecting and where it's going from here on out, especially with its sequel.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't
Absolutely.
know if it's going to be a two-parter, or I mean, more than a two-parter.
Yeah, I know. I want to say the director has discussed it being a three-parter, if I'm being honest, but we'll see.
Okay.
I know people that have read the novel can probably speak to that a little bit better than I can,
Yeah.
because I want to say somebody told me that this part one was about half of the novel, but we've seen before another half of the novel could probably be broken into two, especially because I'm assuming the action gets really big. So I could assume that it could easily be broken into two additional more films to where we have a trilogy. But who knows?
I'm kind of over the let's take one book and put it into three movies. Good
Hmm.
example, the Hobbit trilogy.
I knew you were going with that one.
I mean, it's the easiest one, and I think from people I've talked to, being a moderator for a Facebook group that has over 11,000 people in it, you hear a lot of opinions about the Hobbit.
Yeah.
And when you hear those opinions, they kind of most of the time boil down to it should have been two movies, not
Hmm.
three.
Right.
And I think Dune needs to learn that lesson
Mm.
now
Okay.
because it isn't coming out for like 2 years.
Well, no, since they didn't typically they would green light it and they would already be in production right now, but they just
Right.
now gave it
Today.
the okay to where
Yeah.
it's going to be a minute before it goes in production. So I don't know if we'll see it 2-3 years. Who knows? Who
It
knows?
needs to just be two films. I'm
Okay.
gonna leave it at that as far as what I expect sequel wise.
Okay. We'll see. We'll see. All right.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's get into some actual spoilers now. So those are some just general thoughts from other people, some non-quick spoiler things, but let's actually get into some spoilers. We got some cinematography things we're gonna say, story, acting, potential flaws, thoughts on the villains, all those good things. So again, final warning: if you haven't seen Dune, we're getting into spoilers. Well, with the cinematography aspect of it, there isn't really spoilers per se, other than it's just remarkably shot. I can't get over it. I've said it before. I think we're going to get, hopefully, fingers crossed, that this film gets some Oscar recognition with how well this thing is shot, and I fully expect that to happen. So I've already kind of given my piece as far as the way it looks on my initial reaction video. So I'm going to defer to DJ to start off this conversation and share what he thought of the cinematography and the way this film looked.
It is one of the most immersive movies I've ever seen. Um, I don't think I could say that enough because, you know, the moment it begins, you are kind of sucked into this new reality.
Yes.
And it's not a reality I was immediately familiar with. Like it had
Mm,
elements of certain stories that like this feels like Star Wars or this feels like Star Trek or this kind of feels like Lord of the Rings and
mm.
randomly Guardians of the Galaxy because Dave Bautista's there. So like when you're watching what's happening just from like a landscape type
Mm-hmm.
of situation where there's big, weird blocky looking spaceships and firefly looking spaceships
Dude.
over the top of sand. I mean, it's no wonder this movie is getting praise from the likes of Christopher Nolan and others because
Mm.
these are people who know the work that goes into it. And we just kind of get to sit back and go, that looks cool. Where
Yeah.
they're like, no, you don't realize how cool this actually is.
Right, right.
And I think that's the best thing to say about the cinematography that when you're looking at it, you really do feel like, and this is where like I now kind of get where people, certain directors are saying comic book movies, Marvel movies, etc., are not art.
Mm, mm,
I see what they're saying because their mind's eye
mm-hmm.
then put on screen the way movies like The Prestige or The Dark Knight or Dune, these kinds of movies, I'm now saying, like, obviously, Dark Knight, that's a comic book movie. But I go with The Prestige because The Prestige from a story, and that's kind of different, but story wise, that's an incredible movie. Um, Cinematically speaking, this movie, Dune, the closest movie I could think of cinematically that kind of fits the scope is actually The Hateful Eight from Quentin Tarantino.
Hmm.
Have you seen The Hateful Eight?
I have not.
It's a great. I love Quentin Tarantino's films. I don't broadcast that a lot, but I think he's a masterful filmmaker. A little weird, that's putting it lightly, but at the same time, he knows how to make a movie. And The Hateful Eight is one of those movies that when you look at what it is, broadwise, cinematography wise, it blows certain movies out of the water. Dune now takes that a step further and puts it in a place where you're just kind of like, this is possible.
Yeah.
Like I believed that this was a real place,
Mm.
and
Oh, no doubt.
I'm nearing 30 when your imagination is supposed to not be so vibrant.
Right, right.
It's supposed to be.
And that's something, too, that I mentioned in my reaction. Like, I got lost. I didn't know where I was. I thought I was there. I thought I was on Arrakis. I thought I was with Paul. I thought I was with Duncan. I thought I was doing all of the things that were happening, that was happening on the screen.
Yeah.
And it's rare that happens for me. Like, Lord of the Rings is one that
Yeah.
happens with me. Star Wars, just because of my emotional connection with that story, it happens with me. But outside of those two, I don't know if I've ever experienced something like that before, especially at this
Wow.
age. Because when Lord of the Rings was coming out, I wasn't old enough to understand like
Sure.
film to where I do
Yeah.
now. At this age, this is the most engaged or blown away that
Wow.
I've been by the way something looks.
That's high praise.
Yeah. That's how much this film means to me, honestly.
I feel like I'm hearing about a religious experience is what I feel like I'm hearing about because no, and I get it though. Like I've come away from movies. I mean, I am the definition of a cinephile.
hmm
For me, I even told we talked about this at lunch today. Me and my dad. I get lunch with him and my cousin every Tuesday, and we sat and talked about not just Dune, but a lot of talk about TV and movies. We talk about TV and movies a lot,
Sure.
but I told them I was like I've never seen a bad movie,
Mm.
and that's because that's not true. I've definitely seen bad movies, but
Sure.
like I watch every movie from this incredibly weird tunnel vision type of objectivity
hmm
where like I just put myself in that world and try to like really I'm like really good at doing the tunnel vision thing with certain films. This was one of those movies that I'm actually in one sense kind of glad I didn't see it in the movie theater initially because my tunnel vision would have had to like I would have had to actually walk outside I feel like and look up at the freaking sun and be like, "Okay, I'm on Earth. This is the world I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm not actually on Arrakis. I'm not in the world of Dune.
Right.
So to that extent, I think that just further proves the point I think we're both trying to make about the cinematography.
Yeah. I mean, and don't get me wrong. Don't get this statement wrong. I love. We're so blessed here on Earth. By the way, like the creation that we're around is incredible.
Yes.
But I walked out of the theater and I was like, oh, I'm not there anymore.
I'm
I'm
just in
back.
Tennessee.
I'm just in Tennessee.
Oh man.
So
Well,
that just speaks volumes to the
yeah.
way this thing looked and how
Well,
it captured me.
and the same thing for me. I was at home, so the first thing I did after I finished Dune was I took the trash out.
There you
So like imagine going from it's only the beginning to oh, my trash can's full. Walk out and I live in an apartment, so I gotta go down 3 flights of
Oh,
stairs
that's
to
funny.
go to the dumpster. So I'm just
Yeah,
like, why can't I be like flying a spaceship with Paul right now? I would
sure.
much rather be doing that. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I'm
All
with
right.
you.
Well, look, let's now. So that's the cinematography. Obviously, high praise from us.
Big time.
Let's get
Big
into
time.
the story. So I think this is maybe where some flaws come in from other people. I think some people weren't okay with it just being because essentially this first movie, part one, is about Paul's growth and him realizing what his next path is going to be. And I feel like some people that, from what I've seen online, didn't really feel like we had a third act in this film. It all just kind of blended together and it became just essentially just a setup for something bigger and better in part two. But for me personally, whenever it's character driven like that, that's when I am the most happy. Again, I don't need the flashiness. I don't need the fights, the not okay connection to Star Wars. I don't always need lightsabers in every film. I just need good character driven moments. And Dune executes that so well with Paul and his growth from not really knowing what his path is, not knowing what's going on with these dreams that he's having, to now here at the end of the film, he knows what his purpose is to an extent. I don't think he fully knows yet, but he knows what his purpose is next in this adventure. And for me, that story works and it's absolutely beautiful. DJ, what do you have to say about the story?
You mentioned people saying the story was weak because of him discovering who he is and his
Mm-hmm.
purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a weak point in a
Absolutely.
story. And anybody who I'm saying this to anybody listening or watching, if that's your reason for not liking this film, I'm sorry, you don't know how movies are made. You don't know how movies are
Well,
written.
I think it's just people not getting that massive part three of a film act where it's just massive. I don't know how else to say it except
Well,
massive, like big
there's
time.
some they knew Denis Villeneuve and producers and actors, they all knew that this was 100% getting a sequel.
Yes. Yeah.
And they all went into this movie seeing the script, seeing what's on film, seeing what the director's choices are, the wardrobe, everything, the
Mm-hmm.
sets, everything they're seeing. They look at this and say, I am convinced that this is getting a part two.
Mm-hmm.
even if their character didn't necessarily make it to part two. They know they're a part of something greater, and
Yeah.
that's part of storytelling. Let that character build up so that when the war does happen,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be fought in a way, and it'll be shown to us in a way that we'll respect more. It's like I said, I feel like this is a movie that I'm going to love more and more as time goes on. And it has everything to do, not I mean, I talked about the cinematography for like what felt like an hour, but it was only like amount of just a few minutes. I The story is what makes me want to return to this story.
Yeah.
Why do I want to watch this movie again? Why do I actually now want to go pay $12 in a movie theater to go see this movie? Because I loved it so much at home, which is
Mm-hmm.
never the case. No one ever says that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never heard anybody say, I love this movie so much at home, I want to watch the movie theater. Like
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars, Jaws, E.T., maybe, like those classic films. People may say, I want to see that in the theater. You know, Gone with the Wind, all these other kind of movies. But to say that about this movie that's only been out for like a weekend
Mm-hmm.
and some change, I think that says a lot about the story. For me, this story drove the bus. I mean, I don't even know how else to put it. I'm in the caboose of the train, and it's over here just mowing on ahead. And somehow Warner Brothers is having to figure out how to lay the track down in front of the train because it's just flying.
Right.
And that's what this movie did, and that's just on its story. You know,
Yeah.
I will say this about the story, and because we know that George Lucas pulled a little bit from this movie to make Star Wars, I find it interesting from a biblical standpoint that Paul is the name of our hero, and then
Mm-hmm.
Luke is the name of the hero in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you know your Bible, Paul and Luke are buds, like they're friends. So like the fact that you see this last little, I'm seeing that as a pastor
Sure.
and as a Christian, so I'm like, oh, that's fun. But at the same time, I'm thinking, wow, okay, story wise, there's a lot of little elements that go into something that we both love so much here at Mando Talk and Geekverse is Star Wars. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, it's so cool to watch these things kind of jump into this melting pot and boil down into what has become this film, um, Dune. Even
Yeah.
now, I kind of want to go back and rewatch the original because I know the original was not good, but I still want to see the groundwork before it,
Right. No, I
if that
agree.
makes any sense.
I
So like
agree.
all that to say, the story, just come on. I could now. I need to go. I might stay up late tonight and rewatch this
I
movie because
know. I
it's
know. I
that
really
good.
want to. Something else that kind of pushed this story to the next level. I'm somebody that always loves the father son dynamic in a film, and none other than Oscar Isaac, our boy from Star Wars and many other things, portrayed Paul's father, and his name was Leto, and it was great. We talked about it off air. There's that one line that's in a trailer,
Yeah,
where he's something like, if you don't become House of Atreides, you'll always still be the most important thing, and that's
most
my
important,
son.
most
Like,
important thing. Yeah,
good gracious, man. Like that line, I don't know why, but that hits me so hard. It might just be
yeah,
because, I've always been so appreciative and thankful for my relationship that I have with my father. And so I always love whenever cinema, sports, or wherever you see it in pop culture.
yeah,
I always love a good father son bonding because I think that's important, for people to see. But
I-
anyway, Oscar
yeah,
Isaac
yeah.
as Paul's dad, Paul's father, great part of the story. What did you think of Oscar Isaac's acting and his addition to this story for Dune?
I don't want to say too much for sake of time, but I agree with you on the father son camaraderie within a film. That's why Last Crusade is my favorite Indiana Jones film.
Mm,
And I have a very tight knit bond with my dad and have for my whole life. And I intend to continue that bond with him. So hearing that, I was like, wow, like I know I've heard words similar to that from my dad. And so, like, I know that Timothy Chalamet and Oscar Isaac aren't actually father and son, but
right.
in that moment, I like believed it.
Mm,
And that goes back to what you said earlier about really believing in this story. Um, as far as his acting goes, I could have watched this guy act in this character for the entirety of the movie, and if it was a one man story,
yeah.
I could have watched that.
How
I
did you
mean,
feel? How'd you feel whenever he met his end?
it was I wasn't like so invested that it like killed me,
Hmm.
no pun intended, but it was so surprising, but in the right way.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to see somebody commit self-sacrifice necessarily. And I mean, you guys know, if you're listening and watching, this is a spoiler reaction, so
Sure. Yeah.
I'm not really pulling any punches here. But watching him do the self-sacrifice thing in the way that he did, I was like, I thought it was a bold story move, because I was
Hmm.
like, man, Oscar Isaac is not a he's not a small name.
No.
I mean,
No.
he's A list.
Yeah.
He really is. And so, and I'm not just saying as a Star Wars fan, he's A list. I mean,
Hmm.
he's currently working on Moon Knight. So I mean, you don't just pull in people at random if you
Right.
don't expect them to be A list. And so,
Yeah.
especially for that kind of a movie from
Man,
Marvel. So,
speaking of that death scene, we're talking about acting here. Stellan Skarsgård, man,
oh my
as
gosh, I
Vladimir
know.
Harkonnen. Oh
Speaking of
my
Marvel,
goodness.
I
Like,
was
you're talking, in my opinion, you're talking intimidation of you're getting close. Not
yeah.
to it. You're getting close to Emperor Palpatine vibes for me
Well,
personally. Like,
I got
he
job
crushed it.
I
Crushed
got
it.
Jabba the Hutt vibes.
Oh, okay. I like it. I see it.
And it's just because he's kind of, well, he's large and
Uh,
he's in charge. I
yeah.
mean, it just, you look at a guy like that, it's hard for me not to see that connection. Plus, he's not the emperor. We got to remember,
Right. Yeah.
he refers to the emperor. So really, what we have here is, if to draw the Star Wars parallel, this may be more of a Mando talk special than a Geekverse special at
It
this
might
point.
be. We're connecting
But
this more to Star Wars than Geekverse,
yeah,
man. That's
but
fine though. That's fine.
I don't mind, and I don't think our listeners will mind either. But at the same time, in the case of a parallels, and for parallels' sake,
Uh huh.
um, Skarsgård's character, whose name I cannot remember off the top of my head.
Just refer to him as Harkonnen.
Okay, so
Vladimir is his first name.
we got the Harkonnen leader. He, to me, is more of a Grand Moff Tarkin, and
Ooh.
then
Okay.
and then
You're right. You're right.
but then you've got Bautista being kind of the Darth Vader,
Yeah.
and I don't see those elements being like totally ripped from Dune and thrown into Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
exactly. The one thing that is 100% a parallel is the faceless emperor. Because when you
Yes.
look at A New Hope
Yes.
as it is, an empire always constitutes an emperor.
Mm-hmm.
So even when you watch A New Hope, the empire, who's the emperor, should be
Right.
a question we ask, even though I never did when I was a kid.
Right.
All that to say that I think that in the second part, maybe we'll see
Yes.
an emperor. I mean, I would like that, and to see the connection. So you take Skarsgård's Harkonnen and you throw in Bautista's villain there,
Mm-hmm.
mix it all up, and you get this really cool story of just villains. And really, we know this. Your story is often only as good as your villain,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just enough of a threat to me
Yeah.
because of the power his character possesses, that I was actually afraid for our characters, our heroes. And that's
Yeah.
what you wanted a villain.
Yeah. Absolutely. One thing too that because I did some reading after I viewed Dune. Um, I don't think Bautista's character, and I'm blanking on his name. I'm blanking on who he plays, what his name is.
I'll go pull it up.
It's his nephew. It's the main lead, or it's Vladimir Harkonnen's nephew. He is
Yeah.
not his preferred nephew. Apparently, there's another one that's
Interesting.
in the book that wasn't in this film, and that's why they kind of butt heads a little bit here and there, or it's hinted at that they butt heads a little bit in the film, because he's not the one that he really wants to take his position in
Yeah.
the house Harkonnen once he passes. So maybe that'll be an interesting dynamic to potentially see in a sequel if they go down that route, but they don't have to stick to that. If they feel like Dave Bautista should just carry that role, since they've already
I
kind of set
think,
that up, they could do
yeah.
that. But I'm sure that would upset some novel readers.
Well, we all know that you have to adapt and do things with a novel, and that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. I mean, the famous one from Lord of the Rings is not having Tom Bombadil in the Fellowship of the Ring. And
Yeah.
for the sake of time, it was a good call. But a lot of people who are diehard Tolkien fans would disagree with me on that. However, I did figure out his name. Dave Bautista's character is Beast Raban or Raban, Rabban,
Okay. Okay.
and his last name is Harkonnen. So you got, you're right. I mean, like, I want to see. Actually, you say there's this other nephew
Nephew.
that's, yeah, that's preferred. I want to see that person.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And if they decide to just kind of roll that character into what Bautistas bringing to the table, that's
Hmm.
fine. I get it, but I would love to see the other character.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, any other big time acting performances that you think of that you want to mention?
Yes.
Okay.
First of all, we have the mom played by
Mm.
Rebecca Ferguson playing Lady Jessica
Yes.
Atreides. She, I was kind of like over her character in the first bit of the movie, probably
Mm.
the first half. And then when it was just her and Paul
Mm-hmm.
off on their adventure, I was like, mother son on an adventure? Heck yeah. You
Yeah.
don't get that a lot. And so I was invested at that point. And basically, her being from an order of weird sorceresses that,
Yeah.
have prophecies and whatnot, that was intriguing.
Yes, it
I kept
was.
I kept expecting the word witch to be thrown out there. I don't think I ever heard the word witch in the movie. I could be wrong about that,
I can't
but like,
remember. I can't
but
recall.
yeah, but she kind of struck me as like, a witch in a way, and I thought that was really, really fun. I loved her character, and of course, you can't talk about Dune without talking about Paul,
No.
and so I think Chalamet knocked it out of the
Yes, he
park,
did.
and
Yes,
in
he
like the
did.
weirdest way possible. I roasted Willy Wonka a while back on, I think, on both Geekverse and on Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought this is dumb, like this is terrible. But like I'm watching him play Paul, and I'm like, okay, I need to rethink this whole Willy Wonka situation,
Mm-hmm.
which is not a sentence I thought I would say today when I woke
Yeah.
up. So, having said that, I could go on and on about talking about their acting performances.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to leave it at this. I think they were incredible. I'm really glad that Paul and Lady Jessica are making it into the sequel,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that because of a final shot at the end of this first half of Dune, that Lady Jessica may end up being some kind of a villain
Hmm.
in part two. Although I
Why do
haven't
you
read the
think that?
book. Just there's this one little moment where we see them kind of walking off into the desert at the end of like that last shot. Camera pans on Lady Jessica for just like a brief moment, and her demeanor just changes. I mean,
Mm.
it's like,
Interesting.
so I think it was just a tell, is all it
One
was.
thing that's making me think again, as somebody that hasn't read the novel, is the child that she is bearing right now gonna affect Paul essentially being the chosen one is essentially what he is in the Dune franchise. Like is this gonna create some form of clash as far as her preference of who carries on and becomes the chosen one essentially? I don't know. That's just one thing that I've been thinking about is obviously that's going to impact the story in some form. I just don't know quite yet how it's going to impact it. But that's something to look forward to in the sequels. One thing I did want to mention, though, as far as acting goes, Jason Momoa,
Oh
Duncan,
my gosh,
Idaho,
yes.
crushed it. In my
Oh
opinion,
man,
sometimes he stole the scene. And I think he recently was quoted saying something about how he felt like he was untalented around this cast as they were shooting this film. But in my opinion, sometimes he stole the show. He is phenomenal. I hate that his character came to his end. Maybe we'll get him back in a sequel
yeah.
with a flashback, or maybe Paul has dreams about him or something. That would be really cool because he did a great job, and I hated to see his character come to an end, but it
He
was
was
it was a
like,
natural conclusion for his character.
he was so Han Solo to me.
Yeah.
Like, but like if Han Solo was on like steroids,
Mm-hmm.
like that man, and not implying Jason Momoa is on steroids. I'm just saying, like watching Jason Momoa do his thing in an element I've not seen him in, because really I only know Momoa from Aquaman, if I'm being totally honest.
Uh huh.
So
Game of Thrones.
watching, well, that's for you. In the one episode of Game of Thrones I watched, he's in it, and the whole time I was like, "Can you talk, please?" Like he never spoke, so I was like, "Why aren't you talking?"
Well, that's
Oh,
part of the
anyway,
character growth, man.
whatever. Get to that another day. But you're right about that. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I'm just kind of But
Yeah.
all that to say, yes, agree with you 100% on Momoa. That dude, I do not want to sword fight him. I'll just leave it at that. I think I would lose. Like in
Oh,
like 3 seconds,
definitely.
less than a second, I'm dead.
Definitely. One other final mention as far as acting. Josh Brolin's Gurney.
Oh my
Great.
gosh, he was awesome too.
He did not. We did not visually see him die. I think he's coming back.
I think he is too.
He was great. Loved him. Every single
He
scene
might
that he was
he
in.
might be like an Obi-Wan Kenobi kind of
Hmm,
in a way.
I like it.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Or Gandalf the White.
Yeah. Well, the
Correct.
acting from top to bottom for this film was phenomenal.
Yes.
Couldn't ask for more. Potential flaws is the next thing that we have to discuss, and I'll go ahead and kickstart this with one thing that has bothered me, and that was the lack of use of Zendaya. I don't
Okay.
I don't think the marketing lined up with how much we actually got of her. I mean, they used her like crazy in marketing and promoting, and obviously she's a household name,
Yeah.
extremely talented, so why would you
Yeah.
not? But clearly her story is more so in part two, definitely. But I think that is a potential flaw that people have mentioned. Going into part one, they thought they were going to get a lot of Zendaya, and there's a massive Zendaya fan base. Like
Oh my
Zendaya has
gosh,
her
it's
own fan
insane.
base of her own. So some people went to see that film. I was talking about Dune with some of my students. Keep in mind, these students are 14, 15. They don't know
Yeah.
anything about filmmaking and all this stuff, but
No,
they know
yeah.
about Zendaya because I mentioned that I was going to see Dune, and they said, "Oh, that's the new movie that Zendaya's in." Had to come back to him and say, yeah, "Zendaya ain't in it a lot, so
Yeah.
don't
Yeah,
go to
yeah,
see it
yeah.
for Zendaya." So that's one flaw I do feel like could be out there that I just wanted to mention. I think Zendaya could have been in it more, but for me, story is more important. I think her story's going to be there for a part two. DJ, what do you think
Yeah,
of that? And do you have any other flaws?
yeah, I think that the that's accurate. I think 100% her character is in, the next half.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, that aside, my number one flaw for this, and this may be personal more than anything else, my biggest flaw is I keep comparing this thing to Star Wars.
Mm.
Um, and that isn't really that hard to say. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I've made the Star Wars connection a number of times, too many to count at this point tonight. And it's hard to say anything else flaw wise about this. I would say the pacing, maybe,
Yeah, that was something I
but
was going to ask you about with speed. How you felt
yeah,
about the speed?
it was slow, but it wasn't terrible because when you kind of take a step back and think about what they're doing with the story, the speed and what it takes makes sense. So that's kind of really it. I mean, as far as a comparison and the speed of the overall storytelling, that's kind of it. I
Yeah.
guess as far as I had to say anything on it.
Okay. No, I'm the same way, and I acknowledge those flaws. Like I said, I'm the one that brought up the Zendaya thing, and I acknowledge the flaw that some people are mentioning that it's too slow for them.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me in the slightest, though, personally. Neither that
At this
Zendaya's
point,
in it a
no.
lot, or that the speed of it is kind of slower paced. Doesn't
Yeah,
bother
I
me
think
one bit.
I think as fans of individual actors,
Mm,
we need to just tell ourselves they may not be in this a lot.
yeah.
Whoever, what it doesn't matter who the actor is, what
Hmm.
role they're playing. If it's a smaller role, smaller part, that shouldn't really matter that much
Right.
because at the end of the day, this is a solid film.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really kind of it for me as far
Very
as the
solid
flaws
film,
go.
and it was a remarkable film, and so remarkable, in fact, that we're getting a part two, and we've alluded to that heavily. DJ, why don't you read us the official
Sure.
announcement that Legendary Pictures gave us today as we're recording about a
Yes.
potential part two?
As you said, as of today, October 26, 2021, the Dune sequel has been greenlit by Warner Brothers with a tentative release of October 2023. That is via the Legacy Pictures Twitter account, and a subsequent article I think I read from Deadline, if I'm
Either
remembering
Deadline,
correctly.
Variety, Hollywood Reporter, one of those.
I saw it first on Deadline, but
Okay.
all the major ones are reporting it. I
Right.
saw a Variety article, you know, after we finished our previous episode of Geekverse, and I got on Twitter and I was like, oh, there's that,
Hmm.
So, but anyway, they released that on Twitter and they said this is the this is only the beginning, using that Zendaya line from the end of the first part. Thank you to those who've experienced Dune so far, and those who are going in the days and weeks ahead to also view it. And they said, we're excited to continue the journey. Now, I want to say this because I did not know this. I had to Google it. And if you go back about 5-ish minutes, you may see a shocked look on my face as Caleb was talking about something. Because I decided, okay, how many Dune novels are there?
Mm-hmm.
I Googled it.
Yeah.
There are 6 Dune books.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not know that until today.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that Dune was going to even the potential for a part 2 until I started the movie yesterday when it says Dune part 1.
Yeah.
Which means I now have to retract the thing I said earlier when we started this recording, saying, I hope there's not just, I hope there's only 2 movies. I now am thinking, well, hold up. If they're picking one book into 2 movies, this has the potential to now become 12 movies.
Sure.
Like, and I'm just, that throwing that out there, but there's no way this is going to be 12 movies.
No.
But like, it's a good movie. Don't get me wrong. It's not go to the movie 12 times to see it good.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Now, all that to say, that's a lot of story. And that's a lot of material to adapt.
Mm.
So for me, looking at this sequel, knowing that there's that much potential for what could come, holy cow. I don't even know really where to begin with what I'm looking forward to in a sequel. I couldn't even begin to put my finger on that.
Well, for me personally, what I look forward to the most is simply, I think now that the world building was done so well and the pace was slower for this part 1 to focus on that world building and to focus on character growth of Paul, I think now with part 2 and potentially a part 3, if that's a thing, now there's more room to play. Now we can really get action heavy since we've set up this world. That's what I'm looking forward to the most. And also something that we already alluded to is I can't wait to see the Emperor. That it was teased heavily in this first one, just like they did on in Star Wars, something that we love. They tease heavily the Emperor, and we eventually get him, and it's awesome. I think the same thing. I think they're doing the same thing with Dune.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I keep saying I don't know what to expect or what to even look forward to. I'm just gonna have to steal your thoughts and say, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the Emperor.
Mm-hmm.
Which is so weird to say out of the context of Star Wars.
Uh-huh.
Like I've never said I want to see the Emperor outside of Star Wars, because even then I can only think of only one other movie that would use the word Emperor, and that's Gladiator.
Yeah.
And I would be like, I don't want to see more of Joaquin Phoenix. That's what I would say. I would say, give me Maximus. That's what I would say. And that's so saying I want to see the Emperor. I'm like, for the first time in my life, not saying show me Palpatine. I'm saying, give me this faceless leader of this galaxy who clearly orchestrated whatever the heck's going on in Dune. Which, okay, there's another Star Wars connection.
Yes, there is. There's a lot.
Gummit. George Lucas.
There's a lot. George, what you doing, buddy?
Like, I know, like I've said this, I think, on here before. Mandalorian is something pulled from Tolkien.
Right.
So I'm actually now at this point realizing how much is being pulled into Star Wars, and it's kind of
100%.
It's kind of, I'm not sure if I'm happy about that now.
All right, well, listen, those are our Dune thoughts as we kind of just, we didn't really even have like a lot of notes. That was just a natural flow of a conversation of our thoughts on Dune and spoiler things that we remembered, and I can't wait to watch it again.
Like that walk thing they do, in the desert.
Oh, yeah, dude.
That's how we flowed.
You know what that needs to be? Somebody needs to make that into like a TikTok dance, and I'll finally do a TikTok dance video.
I will make fun of you.
I don't blame you. I won't ever do that. I'm sorry. That was a joke. That was
Take
a
it
lie.
back. Take it back.
That was a lie. Retract that statement. Retract. All right. Well, listen, you tell us what you think of Dune. Hopefully you enjoyed this special episode of a spoiler review. We enjoyed the movie so much that we felt it was necessary to do give it its own episode. And we're honestly thinking that we're going to keep this format going. Like when Eternals drops, when No Way Home drops, all these big time movies.
Yeah.
I think we're going to do special episodes of just spoiler reviews of that film. Just to A, keep it categorized, and to B, avoid sharing spoilers on another episode where you don't want to hear spoilers. But hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and tell us what you thought of Dune. I would love, and I know DJ would love, to talk about this
Yes.
film with other people. It's a film that as many people as possible need to go and enjoy. So go and enjoy it, whether that be in theater or HBO Max. I don't care at this point because we're getting to part 2, so mission was accomplished. That's all I've got to say. I appreciate everybody listening. Subscribe if you're new. Check us out on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google. I don't know, wherever you listen to podcasts and wherever you watch your videos. I'm sure you'll find us somehow. Just type in Mando Talk, Geekverse Reactions. Type in Rebel Scum Texan. Type in Caleb Keller. Whatever you got to do. Do whatever you got to do to find us, and we appreciate it. DJ, I'll pass it to you to get us out of here.
Thank you again for listening and watching.
I ended
here,
there on like a mid-sentence. My bad.
I was like, okay.
Like
anyway,
I enunciated to where I had more to say, but I didn't really have more to say.
I mean, we're all guilty of that from time to time, are we not?
Hey, it's
I mean,
only the beginning.
It's only the beginning. And with that being said, we will see you on Arrakis.